So, hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everybody, to the virtual chapter for, oh my gosh, is it September already? For
Yes.
September 2018. Hi, Karen. How are you?
Hey, Michael. So
So,
good to see you.
yeah, good to see you. This is my lovely sidekick, Karen Hand, who keeps me in check and has just offered so much to this group. So, it's great to see you. Great to see Chicago there behind you, thriving and doing all the lovely things that Chicago does.
I noticed that we're both decked out in the sunset tonight for
Of
the
course,
evening.
we are. Yeah, exactly right. Because this is, yeah, it's just such lovely sunsets here all the time. As we begin, I just need to make a couple of announcements that are sort of usual announcements. That is to let you know that, as I mentioned before we began, to those of you who are in the room, the this evening's presentation is being recorded, and tomorrow, usually it would be by tomorrow about noon, but I have a doctor's appointment in the morning and it's changing my day around. So somewhere tomorrow, it will be posted to the IACT IMDHA forum. For those of you who are members of IACT and IMDHA, you can pick it up there. It will also be posted to the Facebook group, the virtual chapter that I believe most of you are members of. If you're not, please join. Go to virtual chapter, just search it out on Facebook and make yourself a member, and you'll get all the announcements there of upcoming meetings and all the replays of these. So please do that.
Also, IACT and IMDHA members get CEUs for joining us tonight. So log on there and claim your time back. You won't lose any time by being with us tonight. You get it all back. And IHF, International Hypnosis Federation members also get CEUs for joining us tonight. And what we all get for being here is just a wonderful thing, even if there are no rewards or points or anything like that. It's just a wonderful gathering. Thank you all for joining us.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, not only IACT and IMDHA and IHF, but we have been endorsed by the ICBCH as well. So if
Yes.
you're a member of that organization, that's Richard Nongard's group, then you can also get continuing education units for being here for that association. And by the way, you can probably get CEUs from any reasonable organization. Most of the hypnosis groups will simply ask you to keep track of things that you've done outside or classes that you've attended, and if they consider them worthy. And this is a regular meeting about hypnosis, so typically I think that it would get through almost anywhere. For those of you who saw the announcement about tonight, it may have said, referring to, of course, Florida time, that the meeting runs from 8:30 until 10:30. That is a lie. The meeting runs from, it is a flat out lie. The meeting, I did it deliberately, but the meeting actually runs from 8:30 until 10 o'clock. So I'll be here for 90 minutes. And what else? I'd like to hear a couple, to make a couple announcements and let you all know how we are doing before we get on with our wonderful guests. I'm just so excited to get started. But Karen, why don't you fill people in on where we are with our online class, because I think that might be of note to the chapter.
Yes, we are just about to wrap up our online certification for IACT and IMDHA. We did a live weekend. Michael did one with folks in Orlando, and I did one the same weekend in Chicago. And then we blended our classes and did 18 weekends or 18 weeks of online courses, and we're coming up on our last one this coming Sunday will be our final one. Then we'll do a bookended final live weekend. Michael's in Orlando and mine in Chicago, and we will have brand new hypnotists, baby hypnotists. And we've discovered, at least I've discovered, I love this online certification with the breakout rooms and allowing people to practice. It really has been a wonderful, wonderful experience. I hypnotize clients all day long on Zoom, just like we're talking here. I have clients all over the world. Why not teach people to do that right from the get-go? So we're blending the live and digital version, and it's really working out well. So that's where we are with that. We're about to wrap that up.
Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons we're so excited about it is I've got to tell you, I really had some opposition to these things when we first started. I was concerned about not being in the same room and seeing everything that everyone was doing. And so we sought out the software, we looked for it, we considered those things not reasons not to do it, but the particular obstacles that we had to overcome. And I think we've done a really great job of being able to get it together. And gosh, as the technology continues to change, there's going to be so much more of that. It would be lovely, for example, to think that Kaz Riley, our guest tonight, could be, for example, a trainer in a segment of a hypnosis class that I'm doing, or that Karen is doing, and that we can all interact that way in this great virtual community. So so it gets really exciting. The only thing that I really don't like about it is that I love to travel.
You have some travel coming up. Just cool your jets for a second. I want to point out that IACT, and IMDHA was really on a good, cool forefront of this by streaming the conference. They started that a couple of years ago, really letting people know that you can train even if you can't be in person someplace. This coming weekend, there's the 36 Technique virtual hypnosis convention coming up online. And by the way, is it hypnosisconference.com? I'll get a link and put it in the chat room. If you sign up by today, you can get 36 new techniques for the incredibly low price of $39 and do it from the comfort of your own home. It's just amazing. That's one thing coming up. You're going to be traveling to Chicago, Michael, for the Mid-America Hypnosis Conference.
There you go. I will be traveling there indeed in October, and I am looking forward to that. I want to just step back on the calendar one bit, because I'm going to let you tell them about Chicago as well, because that's your baby up there. But also I have the virtual hypnotist class that some of you know I've been doing. Some of you have taken it. It's 3 sessions. It's an online course. So about 4.5 hours investment of your time. It's a $65 course. And what it's really designed for is that people are thinking about taking their practice online and they don't quite know how to go about it. They're not sure how to use the software. They have some considerations about what if this happens, what if that happens. We've been doing it for 10 years. So we've really got some experience with this, and just really love sharing it. It's been an exciting class. So we've done it again and again. We did it every month for about 7 months in a row, I think. And then we started slowing it down a little bit. There's only 15 people in the class, and it does fill up, and it begins a week from tonight. So if you have an interest in being in that class, I need you to get yourself registered soon, because it will definitely close. I'm going to, in the chat room, type a link so that you'll know how to get to that, and I'll do that in just a couple minutes when we finish these announcements. So tell them about Chicago.
Yeah, and as a little plug for Michael, I took that class. Maybe it was the first outing of your class. I don't remember, Michael. And it really increased my business. I do see clients all over the world now, thanks to learning that technology. So it's a really important thing. I thank you for that. Now about Chicago, October 19th, 20th, and 21st is the Mid-America Hypnosis Conference. And it's a wonderful, very small conference that we really have a good time with. I'd love to see you join us.
I would love for them to join us too. And I'll be.
I'm sorry, I thought I was knocked off. I just had.
There was just that pause there. Please.
Everybody vanished for a moment. I thought, what did I say? Did I offend somebody? Michael will be teaching a post-conference there too, and I'd like you to tell us about that.
Yeah, well, the post-conference is evolutionary hypnosis. Most of you have heard me talk about that. And that just really is the approach to hypnosis that I use, and hinged around the sense that our clients have some greatness at the center of their being that is trying to emerge, trying to express itself in their life. Sometimes that shows up in the form of symptoms, by the way. And other times it's just a sense of, I'm ready to become more, I'm ready to expand. I think what a part of our job in this, and I'm oversimplifying the premise, is to facilitate this natural evolutionary process that's already going on within your clients. And so we really talk about some kind of hands-off inductions. I'm training hypnotists how not to give quite so many suggestions, but to create a space in which the wisdom and what needs to happen in the session can emerge directly from the client. So yes, we're really looking forward to that.
I feel like I really am itching to break into a rendition of let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about, is that a little too old school for what we're doing here tonight?
Well, it would be a perfect opening, but I hope you don't mind. I'm going to steal one more minute before we start.
Okay, I'll just sing quietly to myself in the background.
Well, it's the one that I told you about on the phone, because I've got all that enthusiasm, and at the same time, it would just not be right for me tonight to begin this program without offering a little dedication to Steve Andreas, who passed last Friday. Really important teacher. Man, if it weren't for Steve, Steve is the place where my life made a left-hand turn, you know, in the sense that I had just begun studying hypnosis, and I read this book called Frogs into Princes, which, as I recall, was written by John O. Stevens, who had quite a credentialed history in the field of Gestalt therapy and was the author of Gestalt Therapy Verbatim, a rather significant character in his own right prior to neurolinguistic programming. And John O. Stevens had edited this book, which is a transcript of Bandler and Grinder presenting an NLP practitioner training. And I was so excited by it that I wanted to get involved. And at the end of the book, there were a couple pages that said, if you'd like to learn about neurolinguistic programming, you can come to Colorado. NLP Colorado, as it was called in those days, is offering this 27-day practitioner training program. And I swear to God, I loaded up my van and I moved myself to Colorado as quickly as I could. So Steve was my first teacher in neurolinguistic programming. And in my experience of all of the people that I know in NLP, particularly the leadership of NLP, whatever that means, but the figureheads in NLP, I guess, or the names that people know, there was not a nicer guy, a kinder guy in the truest, richest sense of the word. I mean, he could call a spade, and I think you pretty much knew where you stood with him. But it was really all done from such a wonderful place of compassion and caring and commitment to the field of NLP. And as so many of us know, NLP has some rocky history between the founders of NLP and some of the other folks involved. And throughout all of the turmoil in those days of neurolinguistic programming, what I never saw was Steve Andreas misbehave or carry on like some crazed person in the middle of it. He maintained his dignity and his decorum, and really put it out there and really wanted people to do great work. So the world is blessed because he was here, and I know certainly that I am blessed because he was here. So I just had to share that with you. And of course, it is also the anniversary of September 11th, worthy of mentioning today. Yes, Don.
I just said here.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about your opportunity to participate in the 36 Techniques Virtual Hypnosis Convention. Just as easy.
Where did that come from?
I was trying to get a link, and it just started talking. I didn't mean for that to happen. Sorry.
Lovely.
An unexpected guest, an unexpected appearance by Richard Nongard.
I guess. Well, all right. So now you want to do your song again, or?
I just want to say I am so sorry that I skipped over Steve. I certainly didn't mean to. Call it a crime of passion, if you will. But
well, that's exactly right. And the thing about tonight, by the way, that is so cool is we are going to talk about my favorite topic, hypnosis, right?
Okay.
with the wonderful Kaz Riley. I've got to tell you, Kaz is a UK-based hypnotist. She is an advanced trainer. She's a specialist in treating anxiety-related issues and sexual-related issues, including fertility, birth trauma, sexual dysfunctions, sensuality, and kink-friendly therapy. She is a registered therapist with the National Coalition of Sexual Freedom. She teaches at several UK universities to midwives, doctors, nurses, and medical students. Oh, my Lord. And she mentors hypnotists in 17 countries and has appeared in several newspapers and magazines and on TV. She's the founder of Sexual Freedom Hypnosis, an internationally taught hypnosis program that is sought after by clients worldwide. She says that sexual freedom is the ability to choose to have a consenting, confident, satisfying sex life in the absence of sexual dysfunction, guilt, and shame. So, gosh, Kaz, hello.
Hello.
And as we get started, I have got to quote the Bible. I know that it's in the Bible somewhere, that I'm sure that Eve must have said to the serpent, where exactly shall we bite into this apple at? So here's my opening question for you. First of all, how did you get involved with sexual? This is quite a specialty, you know. So how did you get involved with sexual freedom hypnosis?
Well, I think like most things, like hypnotherapy niches, it kind of finds you, doesn't it, rather than you find it. I think the thing that you really excel at kind of finds you. And actually, I was lucky enough to be taught by Lindsay Eastburn over in Colorado, the hypnofertility. This is 13, 14 years ago now. And really kind of went from there. So, and basically what happened is the doctors were sending me the fertility clients, and it just so happened that most of my fertility clients all had sexual dysfunction. So we realized that was the reason why they were having their fertility treatment. So it made sense to treat the sexual dysfunction, and lo and behold, they didn't need their fertility treatment. So it was something that I kind of fell into by accident, and it's kind of carried on since then. And, you know, really without me realizing that not very many people were doing it as well. I've kind of been sat in my office here all these years, just kind of getting on with stuff and not really realizing there wasn't that many people that were working with those issues. So it's a happy accident really, but it's been, yeah, what can I say? It's such an amazing, interesting area to work in.
And how long have you been doing this? How long ago did this begin?
So this is, I mean, I've been working with sexual dysfunctions for about 16 years, but the real kind of fertility clients with the sexual dysfunction started coming through me about 14 years ago. I could probably look on the certificate on my wall and tell you when I did the hypnofertility, but it was definitely, it must be at least 14 years, because I think my eldest son was about 3 months old when I took that training. So, you know, it's just been all kinds of stuff. And I didn't even realize that they hadn't even classified female sexual dysfunction then. You know, that was back in 1998 that they first did that. So, you know, we're a bit behind the times, aren't we? We think Viagra was launched not long after that, or before that, in fact, actually. So, it just goes to show where we really need to catch up, don't we? Us ladies have got a lot of catching up to do, I think.
Oh, yes. We don't have a lot of catching up to do. The world has to catch up to us, it seems to me.
Absolutely.
They haven't figured us out yet.
I didn't catch that. What was that?
I said they haven't figured us out yet.
No, well, you know, we're quite unfathomable and very mysterious, so that's always good.
So I'm curious, Kaz, what is erectile dysfunction the biggest request you get to work with, or is it fertility, or is it something else?
Right. Okay. So now I think basically because I advertise for sexual dysfunction in men, erectile dysfunction is the biggest thing that I would see in terms of the numbers. And what's interesting about that is that the age of that client has got younger and younger and younger, especially over the last 10 years. So where we used to think about that as being an older man's problem, it's now right across the board. I'm seeing guys 22 upwards with erectile dysfunction. And we can have a chat about later as to why that might be. But actually what I'm seeing now is a massive uprise of women that are seeking help for things like low libido. You know, women are stopping now just thinking that it's acceptable or that it's just normal that they would hit menopause, for example, and then their libido would go way before then, after they've had a child or something. And actually I'm now seeing lots of women where the libidos are going up after menopause because they're not worried about getting pregnant anymore. So I think you know, women have become much more confident in seeking help with their sexuality. And it's about connection, isn't it? You see, that's the thing. If they feel unable to have sex and they're not getting that connection in with their partners and their loved ones, which is kind of what this is all about. It's not just about a physical act, is it? It's about everything else. So in men, erectile dysfunction, with women, libido. And vaginismus is the other one, which if you listen to the medical profession, they'll tell you is quite rare. But I see 5 or 6 people a week with vaginismus here. So that tells us it's probably much more common than we thought. It's just probably not reported very much.
But it was the fertility field that opened all of that up to you, that opened up the door to let people even ask you about that.
Absolutely. And it was only by asking questions, really, of, taking that really thorough consultation, finding out why people were having fertility treatment. And, it's amazing how many will say, well, I've got erectile dysfunction. Or obviously, if you've got vaginismus, and your vaginismus, for those people that don't know, is where the vaginal muscles clamp down when any penetrations try to occur. So obviously that makes sex impossible, which then makes becoming pregnant easily almost impossible. So lots of women then going for fertility treatment, but obviously are still needing to have smear, the pap smears, and obviously the treatment itself. So, just by being able to be relaxed that way makes a massive difference, whether you're having fertility treatment or you can get pregnant just by having sex. So yeah, interesting, isn't it? Right from, so now I end up doing right through from preconception all the way through to sometimes even being a doula with a woman that's giving birth. Sometimes I go right the way through.
So do they ever say my hypnotist made me pregnant?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a few people have said that, go see Kaz Riley, she'll make you pregnant, which is an interesting concept.
Yeah. Good for you. I hope magazines are writing about that. I know that you've been in a number of magazines. Is that where they contact you about?
Initially, yes, the fertility, hypnobirthing. More recently, it's more about the sexual function and stuff. So, but they do like the stories about women that have had 5 cycles of IVF, for example, and then get pregnant naturally. I mean, it's always a lovely story, isn't it? Because it's a story of hope, isn't it? People often give up hope, this doesn't seem to be any hope, and and then they find someone, their little miracle happens, which is always, children are such a wonderful thing, aren't they? So it's something we hope every couple could have if they chose to.
Isn't it so natural for hypnosis, since we're taught early on, the harder you try, the more you can't. The harder you try, the more you can't. Well, relax then already.
That's it.
Kind of a natural process.
It is, but it's one of those things, isn't it? With especially with pregnancy and fertility, is we live in a world, don't we, where the harder we try, the more, we're taught, aren't we, as women as well, that we need to work hard, and anything that we want, we need to go and get. So often what happens is, women start using ovulation sticks the minute they decide they want to be pregnant, and that stress builds up, and they don't listen to their own bodies. They don't look at how their bodies are own work. They kind of switch off. So I think a lot of what we do as hypnotists with that is, one, to relax them, get them to stop trying so hard, but to tune back in so they're actually listening to what their bodies are telling them. I mean, our libido naturally rises, doesn't it, when as we ovulate? So it's about just getting back in tune. Let's have a look. Yeah. Medical doctors, yeah. Am I right to answer some questions as I see them popping up and stuff like that?
You can, and we'll also give you a little time at the end for just straight out Q&A when when people can mic up. But sure enough, if you want to respond to Catherine here, she's saying that medical doctors don't take women seriously about their desire for sexuality, and doctors saying, "Oh, you're just at that age."
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things I think there's been a real shift, and I think this is a real positive shift. And, I think medical doctors are taking women more seriously, but they're very limited by what they can do. So, they kind of will say, well, it's maybe to do with your age. It's maybe because you're tired. It's maybe because you don't like your partner or your husband very much. All kinds of reasons that I kind of put to women as why their libido, especially, or their sexuality, then they're kind of not feeling it. And I always say, if you contrast that with how a man's treated, and when they go into the doctors, it's immediate kind of hormonal workup. They're given Viagra. It's taken very seriously. things move forward very quickly, whereas with women it's kind of a bit more, well, it might be this and it might be that, and don't worry, dear. And actually, women's libidos are just the same as men's. This idea that men have a higher libido than women do is actually nonsense. I know plenty of women that have higher libidos than their partners. It just depends on the particular individual. And I think we need to help women to feel empowered to be heard by their doctors, even if it's just to get the hormone check, just to see if there is something that's going wrong with that, whether that's the estrogen or the testosterone. But then also, if that's not the case, we now know that the way a woman's libido works is very different to how it was thought to work, because a lot of the models and a lot of the way that the medics were taught was based on the model from 1966, which just looked at 4 stages of arousal. And now we know that, with the further studies that have come out in, this century, thank goodness, is that it's a much more circular thing. And there's a lot more that feeds into sexuality and sensuality for a woman and men, I think. I think that model probably applies to both, which is much more about having a good experience and being confident, and communication and body confidence, and feeling good about it, and connection and love and all the things. It's not just about a 4-stage arousal cycle. And I think women are starting to wake up and understanding themselves more, that it's not just about leaping into bed, it's about all the stuff that goes around that.
The mental component that goes with it, because it's not just a physical act. Sex is often in the mind.
Well, our brain is our largest sexual organ, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Without it, that we don't really feel anything. And this is one of the, but as women as well, our brains quite often, we've been conditioned to believe that sex is wrong, that nice girls don't feel sexual, that we shouldn't enjoy sex, that that's not the right thing to do, that it's for procreation, it's just for
only procreation only.
Yeah. And it's that, and then when women do have said that they did enjoy it, they've been shamed by doing that, or they've been made feel guilty if they've wanted it. So all of these things are, things that we really need to overcome, so that, women can be the wonderful sexual beings that we are. And then they can choose to have sex or not. That's the thing. There's nobody saying that people have to have lots of sex. It's the ability to choose that, and certainly not to feel guilty about it, and not to feel shameful about doing the thing that not a single person on this planet could be here without. We all are here as a product of 2 people having sex, aren't we? And
Kaz, the thing that I think is so special about what you do is that, as Catherine mentioned about her doctor, for example, earlier, that one of the things that we really have to bring to the field, and this is kind of leading to my next question, is the opportunity to create a space where people aren't shamed for their issues, but they are welcomed. That we don't start out with some kind of predetermined model about how they're supposed to end up when we've finished with them. Mm-hmm. That the atmosphere becomes inviting, and what I'm curious about is the actual work that you do, particularly with regard to things like dysfunction, just sexual dysfunction of any kind. I'm wondering, is it significantly different work than you would do for any other symptom, or is the difference lie in the fact that you create an openness for that topic in that arena?
I think it's a little bit of both. So there's nothing majorly different, I think, about the work that we do with any anxiety client. I think a lot of sexual dysfunction, like a lot of the work we do as hypnotists, is based in anxiety, isn't it? Whether that's the ability to perform, the ability to connect, fear of intimacy, the fear of rejection is a big one, isn't it? So I think in terms of the way that we work generally, a lot of that applies to sexual dysfunction clients. And I tell people that you have probably all the tools that you need to work with these clients. What you need to do is to be comfortable with it. And, it's really about sex has been shrouded in such mystery and all the shame that I think a lot of therapists sometimes feel that shame around that and talking about it. So it's about creating a really safe place where people can be really open and honest about how they feel and what they enjoy and what they haven't enjoyed. And also sometimes it's about admitting that maybe they've been saying they've been enjoying something when they haven't. I had a lady in here last week that, you know, has been married for 25 years and has been faking orgasms for 25 of those years. So, you know, it's very difficult to then have a conversation, isn't it, with a partner, for example, unless you find a way to do that. So there's, you know, by creating a safe space here, they can then create a safe space at home and start communicating in a way maybe that they haven't done before. But, you know, people, if we can provide that space where people don't feel judged, I mean, I think especially for a lot of men, if they're talking to you about erectile dysfunction or premature ejaculation, I think things have come along now since the launch of Viagra. It's made that much more, you know, even though there was things around before that for erectile dysfunction, but that it was Viagra that really kind of lifted that shroud of shame, if you like, off that. And I think now it's time for women to do that. It's just that, you know, it's not going to be the pharmaceutical industry that does that. It needs to be, I think, probably more the talking therapies and, you know, and just, it's re-education, isn't it? It's being told it's all right to be sexual, that it's okay to want that. It's okay to want something different. That understanding that our bodies change as we get older, how our bodies react change, you know.
Haven't I understood that they're aren't they giving Viagra to women now?
It's not licensed as yet. And interestingly, I haven't heard of it here or been given to women in the general population, but they have been giving it to fertility clients for blood flow around the uterus and the labia and all that kind of stuff when they're just after they've done the embryo transfers. But again, that's about blood flow, isn't it? So this is the kind of misinformation around Viagra that it will give a man a libido. It doesn't. It's when he's got a libido, it can allow him to have an erection that he can maintain. But it doesn't necessarily give him that kind of sexual feelings, and it probably won't for women either. But, you know, it's the cure-all at the minute, isn't it? You know, it's like antidepressants is the cure-all for any sad feelings. So.
Sure enough. There are a couple of questions showing up in the chat room that I can kind of condense it because at least two of them overlap. Both Don Pellis is asking if you use the Marie Mongan hypnobirthing, and Silence of Hypnosis is asking about if there are any particular specific techniques that you use in your work.
Okay, so the Marie Mongan hypnobirthing, I am trained in that. I trained that years and years ago, and I've also trained in several other different hypnobirthing techniques. And then I do what most hypnotists do when you use techniques a lot, is you take a bit from this and a bit from that, and then you make it work for the client that's in front of you. But it's certainly a very good course. But that's how I work with that now. And then the other course was talk about some of the techniques that I can use. So there's really obvious techniques. Things like control room of the mind is a great one for all kinds of sexual dysfunction, right the way through from things like ED, right the way through to things like anorgasmia, the inability to orgasm. I use that sometimes with vaginismus, just to kind of relax the muscles down a little bit. Although I've adapted a technique, if those of you that are familiar with gut-directed hypnosis for irritable bowel syndrome, and of course the vaginal muscles are a similar kind of muscle to the gut. So I often do something called yoni-directed hypnosis, which is about putting good energy and cleansing energy back into the whole feminine space. Actually, it's not just about a vaginal space. It's about connecting that kind of feminine power back to do that. Regressive techniques obviously are useful for stuff like this, all different kinds of ones. So even a lot of inner child stuff, all kinds of stuff, really. It really depends on the client that's sat in front of you, isn't it? What I don't have is, this is the protocol that I always use for erectile dysfunction or vaginismus, or, you know, because everybody's slightly different. So I have a kind of a flow protocol, really, if, you know, could kind of look through and see what happens and where we are with something. Because, you know, it's a bit, I know a lot of people tell me that they wonder if they've been abused, for example, if they've got vaginismus, and, you know, thankfully most of them haven't been, but it's been suggested to them that they might be, and that might be why they have it. Where, you know, a lady that really kind of sticks in my head is a lady that I had last year who didn't know how to say no to her boyfriend when she was 17. So basically clamped her muscles together so she couldn't be penetrated, and it just became a habit that's what she did every time she was aroused or had sex. So does that answer the question? You have to forgive me because it is late here, so my mind rambles anyway. I'm so dyslexic, but, you know, in the middle of the night it goes off on a real tangent.
You said the most important thing: listen to your clients, and they will tell you where to take this. They will tell you where to go.
Yeah.
And use the techniques of relaxing the mind or utilizing the mind.
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of, especially with my sexual freedom clients, of a really in-depth consultation. And I think one of the reasons that I do that, again, it's about creating that safe space. But, you know, I speak very frankly to them about sex. People aren't used to speaking frankly about sex. So even just taking them through that process, where, you know, within that consultation, they're speaking to me frankly about sex, I think that's a major shift in their minds as to what needs to happen and how they feel about things. It takes away, you know, that's the first step, isn't it, is to being able to speak openly and frankly about something, to getting the resolution that they're looking for. And then also listening to exactly what that means to them. Good sex means something different to absolutely everybody, doesn't it? You know, it's not there isn't a universal thing, although people believe that there is. And sadly, the internet is their point of reference for that, which, you know, has now become pornography, which, you know, the soft porn or the hard porn, or the hard porn of yesteryear is now the soft porn of today. It's not particularly helpful to women, I don't think. I think it's quite detrimental to women. And, you know, that's where the youth of today are learning what good sex looks like, which I think is very worrying for the future, really. You know, it will certainly keep us in a job for a long time, I think.
It sounds like you're spending an awful lot of time dehypnotizing, as we so often do, right? Things that they have heard and brought in with them.
Absolutely. I think we do that right across the board as hypnotists, though, don't we? You know, you know, that's the first step, is that differential between what we know and what we believe, isn't it? And often people's beliefs are where they've kind of been negatively hypnotized, if you like, but they know it should be different, and we help marry up the two for them, don't we? You know?
Yeah. So Joe has a pretty direct question. How do you go about helping a woman who has experienced unwanted sexual abuse when she's young and truly wants to feel comfortable in an adult relationship, but comes in with the fear and absolutely no desire to ever go back to that ISE?
Okay, so I guess it's about empowering her to be able to deal with that, and maybe doing it in a dissociated way. I don't think we have to kind of regress people back to the point where they're reliving something. I think we have many tools that we can use to protect a client. So it's about empowering a client in that situation, isn't it? To either let go of something, but also maybe about being able to deal with it. I think maybe it's that the confidence to deal with that initial sensitizing event. It's not telling that they have to do that, but usually we do have to clear it, don't we? We have to clear it somehow if we know that's causing the sexual dysfunction. But also, I think it's about clearing it away, because sexual abuse, although it's sexual, is about power. It's a bit in the way that we might look at rape, for example. So it's very much about giving the power back to that person, and then actually we don't necessarily have to go through the nitty-gritty of what happened to them, but they can move forwards in an empowered way, so they can separate out the power issue that was there and sex, because sexual abuse is about somebody being overpowered, isn't it? You know, the same as rape is as well. So that would be where I would start with that, probably.
Cool. Okay, I need to represent the testosterone brigade.
Go ahead.
There are a couple of questions. Actually, David Ruby had asked if people are more responsive. Let me see if I got this right. One gender or another. Do you find there's any difference in how men or women are accepted as hypnotists for these sorts of issues? And along with that, I'm curious, just to put it out there. You said something earlier about young men coming at younger and younger ages around erectile dysfunction, and you sort of hinted that you have a theory about that. So I'm curious to hear it.
Okay, so let me answer the first question first, and then remind me of the second question, because my dyslexic brain won't necessarily hold on to two questions.
All right.
But in terms of, I guess I only have experience as a woman working with this, but I have a lot of colleagues that are male, and we both see men. And I think the client finds the person that they feel most comfortable with, and I don't think it's. I don't think it's an advantage or a disadvantage to be male or female, really. We kind of make a lot of assumptions, don't we, about men might be more comfortable talking to men, but my client split here is about 50-50. So I'm assuming that a lot of my male colleagues' split is 50-50. The question about why men are becoming younger and younger, experiencing erectile dysfunction, there's a lot of research that's gone into that, which is something called the Coolidge Effect, which I believe is a president that you had over there at some point, which was to do with the fact that where it's to do with the facts of the pornography online and dopamine saturation of the brain. So one of the things that we know drives sexuality, drives arousal, drives libido is dopamine. And basically, because if you imagine in the days of old when we were young, pornography is around, it's always been around, but it was then in the form of magazines, it was in the form of, the odd video or the odd DVD that was kind of passed around from person to person. What we have now is the internet, where you could literally spend all day and all night for the rest of your life watching pornography, and you would never watch the same thing twice. It's been churned out at a huge rate. So what we've got is this kind of novelty of young men, especially, although young women as well, is, kind of clicking through item after item after item after item. And, their arousal, their orgasms, their sexuality, if you like, becomes a very alone thing. So what happens is when they're then placed in the presence of somebody that they want to have sex with, be that male or female, then their body isn't reacting in the way, because it's basically being conditioned for something more extreme or for a much higher dopamine surge. So then they're not getting aroused, which is then meaning that, they're not, that they're not getting an erection. Viagra doesn't work because they've got no arousal there. So it's one of those interesting ones that we now know pornography is actually one of the biggest causes of erectile dysfunction in men across the board, but especially in young men. And I've seen a massive rise in certainly college-age men.
Wow.
Which is quite scary, isn't it?
It is quite scary. And what do you do? I mean, do you have to then go on a no pornography viewing expedition for months and months to desensitize yourself from it?
Well, it could take about 3 months, but then, of course, there's all the other issues to deal with. So they've then had a bad experience because they've had erectile dysfunction. They are often not able to connect. It's a connection thing. They're very disconnected from their own bodies because it's been a very visual thing, with masturbation and an orgasm. There's no kind of love, connection, what they've seen. It's this very much hands-free sex where it's all about penetration. It's all about camera angles. I had a young man in here about 3 years ago that was genuinely traumatized because he'd had his first sexual experience and this woman had pubic hair. I mean, this is because that's not what they're seeing on the internet. So, you know, it's at school, you know, certainly here in the UK, you know, children are being taught about contraception, but not about affection. So, you know, they're missing out on a lot of how relationships are formed. So in terms of treating a young man with ED, that's basically it's helping him to kind of get over the porn, helping that dopamine to reset. So I use a technique that I call dopamine reset, which allows, it's kind of tapping into that very primitive part of the brain so that we're altering the sensitivity because it becomes so oversensitized. And really helping them to kind of connect back in with their own feelings right the way up through their body so that they can connect in with somebody else's. Because if you're disconnected from your own feelings, it gets very difficult to connect in with somebody else. And, you know, that's where relationships and love and all of those things are formed. And that's the thing that's kind of missing at the moment, I think. Sorry, I never do short answers.
Yeah, well, that's fine. And just to point out, by the way, David Ruby, bless your heart, has found us an article on the Coolidge Effect. So there is a TED Talk. There is a link available in the
Fantastic. Thank you, David.
Yeah, thanks, David. English parents have fueled education. At least it is better than USA.
Well, so I hear. I mean, I do believe that in terms of sex education in some states in America, that what they're taught is abstinence, and that's it.
Yes, that's it. That is another big problem too.
Well, not only that, Kaz, what you were talking about a minute ago about, I think what we're also taught is not just contraception, but it may be that we're taught procreation. It may be, I think one of the things that happens in American schools, because people are so touchy about this subject, is that on the one hand, they sort of think that it belongs there, but it belongs there in science class as a very scientific, biological principle.
Absolutely.
And
it's reproduction, isn't it, rather than connection.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think as well, you know, if you look at countries like Holland, for example, where, you know, their sex education in schools is very, very different. You know, they have a really low teenage pregnancy rate. They have very few women that have problems in childbirth. Because you know, we're often, you know, women are often, and especially men, but I think men as well, but especially women, you know, we're kind of put off having sex through fear, aren't we? You know, that we'll get pregnant, our lives will be ruined. And, you know, that isn't necessarily the way to teach about these things, where if we teach people to be respectful of their bodies and be respectful of other people's bodies, about all the wonderful connections that can bring, about love and tenderness, but also about the different flavors of sexuality, and be accepting of all of those, so that then you can find the person and connecting with the person where you share that with. Then, you know, it's about sexual confidence, isn't it? And that doesn't necessarily mean that you want to go and have sex with anybody, but it's about knowing what you want, and about consent, and about being able to say no as well as being able to say yes. So,
and that's part of it, isn't it? Being able to say no. Sometimes we have to teach clients about saying no.
Mm.
And having the right to say no, having their boundaries in place.
Well, this is it. And, you know, it's not that long before, you know, or not that long since, you know, rape was actually made illegal for a man to rape his wife. I mean, you know, we're told that we can't say no. So, and having that voice, and then also being able to say, if you want to say yes, saying how you want that yes to be. Yeah. And how, you know, and people don't do that, or haven't had that voice to do that, because there's been so much shame surrounding talking about sex. You know, this idea that, you know, people leap into bed and turn off the light, and, you know, it just all occurs. And, you know, it's we're not that. It's only, when you think, you know, the contraceptive pill only arrived in the 60s, when it's not that long ago, is it, you know? So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, yeah. So we were talking about the right to say no, and as you started to turn it in that direction too, I was thinking the same thought about, well, and for some people, it's about the right to say yes. And the whole notion of alternative sexualities comes into play here. One of the things, just for me, everybody on this forum probably already knows that I'm gay. I've been gay since Jesus first invented homosexuality, or whoever, and I can remember times when it never occurred to me that I wanted to not be this. It did occur to me that that I needed to not be known, that I, all sorts of stuff, and hiding out. I lost 27 personal friends in San Francisco during the AIDS epidemic. My partner and I have been together for 37 years, married thanks to the recent wisdom of the Supreme Court, a few years ago. And we've watched through those years. I mean, as a young man, what I remember was being in gay pride parades in Chicago when they were first having parades. I mean, the literally Stonewall and the whole gay movement in America seems to have begun the year that I got out of high school. And I remember at that time, we thought we want to make a lot of noise. We want everybody to just see and understand and change their mind about this tomorrow and get clear about it. It didn't occur to us, by the way, and maybe it's because I'm old enough now to say this, that we were really asking a lot of our parents, because they grew up in a culture, that they were deeply affected by, and we were expecting them to switch gears in just a moment and kind of embrace a new age that was very foreign to them as well. So we've seen a whole lot of things loosen up, certainly for the gay community. But now there are similar questions with the trans community. And when I moved to Orlando, my first hypnosis client here, I moved here from San Francisco. I got a phone call from a woman that said, Michael, I'm thinking about booking. I'd like to book an appointment with you. She says, but I need to know, are you comfortable with alternative sexualities? And I thought, I've just, for God's sake, I've just moved here from San Francisco. It didn't occur to me that this was going to be any sort of challenge. I'm like, sure. And when she came in, I was expecting her to tell me that she was a lesbian. Mm-hmm. What she said instead was, my husband and I have been dating a couple for several months now, and we're thinking about getting married. And it was just like, oh my gosh. So these four actually did, in fact, develop a relationship and became the hub of Central Florida's polyamory community. Mm-hmm. And people had all these issues about coming out and stuff that hadn't even occurred to me that were going to be there. And they were all getting referred to me. So it was for a while, I had a specialty just in that. Because it presented itself. So I don't know where to go from there other than, so here's kind of what I've seen. I think things are changing, but the focus is shifting. And again, I think the transgender community now is probably a place where there's a whole lot of shifting going on.
I think right across the board with all sexuality and kind of sexual preferences and practices actually as well, I think that's shifting right across the board anyway. But certainly within the sort of transgender community, that's in terms of, I think more help is out there now. I think people, rather than just being told not to be silly, which is kind of what they were being told, not to be ridiculous, they're being listened to now. And, there's the operations and the drugs and things that are occurring as people transition. I think some of the psychological care is still very lacking. I think if you've essentially been living in the wrong body up until the point you transition, the idea that just by transitioning will make that all right, I find quite shocking, because you've got all those years, haven't you, of often people hiding away, not feeling like themselves, not being able to feel that they are who they truly are. And then they transition, and then that takes, a lot to get used to, doesn't it, on the other side of that? And, there's a lot of support. Certainly some of the members of the transgender community that I work with need a lot of support with that. It's a big change. We know, I know it's not the same thing, but if you look at how, people that suddenly gain or put on a lot of weight, just that change in terms of how they view themselves, there's a big lag between the two. So if you imagine that a lot of your bodily features have changed, even though that's been put right, essentially, it still takes a long while for the brain to kind of catch up and accept, because it's a big change, isn't it? You know, and it one that needs a lot of support. So I think within different sexual practices, so, you know, people that have a very varied sexual kind of vocabulary, I guess you could call it, can now be more open about that. But that was shamed until very recently. Although, you know, if you look back at the Greek gods and, you know, just how the Greeks lived, last year I was in Pompeii, and, you know, there's kind of kink acts depicted there. Yeah. You know, it was only kind of when, you know, religion kind of moved in and told everybody what they could and couldn't do, that all this became wrong. So, of course, like anything, all it did was shove it underground, and, you know, it's coming more to the surface again. Now with things like, you look at the absolute sensation 50 Shades of Grey caused, not the best depiction of alternative sexual practices. It's a very abusive relationship, but it tells you how many people have been doing this stuff all along, or have wanted to, just by otherwise it just wouldn't have had the reception that it got. And, you know, on the back of that, a lot of the paraphilias, you know, like fetishes, for example, have been kind of depathologicalized, which, you know, that community as well finds itself in the position that the gay community found itself in, you know, 30, 40 years ago.
Exactly. Joe has an interesting comment here about a trans client that she had that was very upset, thinking that she was murdering her children's father, and that they had to do some sessions around that. I think it's fascinating to me that, on the one hand, as a gay man, one of the things that I sort of think is that I don't know that I want any sort of special treatment. What I really want is the same kind of treatment and response that I sort of feel like I ought to be able to expect. And generally, I don't think that my issues are really different than anybody else's.
Exactly. That's exactly what I teach on the sexual freedom hypnosis course. What we're working with is people.
Well, exactly, and yet here Joe is bringing up an issue that obviously is very specific to this to the issue of transgender.
I think I've never heard a transgender client say that to me, in fairness, but I think that's probably a lot to do with kind of reframing of, you know, murdering their children's father. The person is still the person. So, you know, I guess that's maybe some work around that, you know, whether male or female, the person is still their child's father, isn't it? You know, however that may be, even as if there's a transition to a woman, that love for their children doesn't change any. And, you know, as we often say, isn't it, you know, it takes more than sperm to be somebody's father or somebody's parent. So it's just about how that transitions, you know, they transition their role as their parent along with their transition, I think. It's about self-acceptance, maybe, that actually, than anything else, I think.
I wonder if it's a metaphor too for what they felt they were doing, killing off.
Or maybe what they've been told they were doing. That's the other thing as well. It's where that belief has come from, you know. And I would look around and have a look at self-acceptance with that and see where that belief has come from. And it may be, you know, it's about accepting, you know. I always say to my transitioning clients that, you know, women have masculine traits and, you know, men have feminine traits, and they can take some of those things with them. They don't have to lose their identity. It's about becoming their best selves, as in the most who they are completely, rather than losing something. You know, they're actually kind of putting something right, if that makes sense.
There's kind of an interesting paradox here, in that I think sometimes the issue for the client is about self-acceptance, as you say, and yet other times, or at least half of the issue, at least for me in my experience, has been about accepting the fact that other people may not be as accepting of me as I think that they ought to be. That is, so part of it's about accepting myself, and another part of it is about accepting the way that the world, and I don't mean making it okay. Don't mishear that.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean at least having a realistic assessment of what is going on in the world that I live in, and not taking it personally as an indictment of me, but of something lacking in our culture that needs, development, and that there is a need for more understanding.
Well, it's re-education across the board, isn't it? People often make decisions about whether they accept something or not, which is based in fear, isn't it? Fear of what, or what they've been taught as well. So it's re-education is never a quick thing to do, is it? So it's about doing that, but also about not feeling the need that we have to be on a crusade to change people's minds about everything. It's knowing that's a gradual process, isn't it? And also then kind of being protected from those people that are maybe less than positive, so that we're not taking on board their negativity. And I think that's the problem, isn't it, for a lot of people that haven't quite got to their own point of self-acceptance, is that they're still very much influenced by other people's negativity. Sure. And it's about helping them to kind of see that, other people have different opinions, and that's okay. It's that kind of, it's that personal boundary, isn't it, of knowing you're okay and you're safe within it, really. Yeah,
exactly.
And that's setting up their own personal boundaries, right? Because if they haven't really settled into how to feel about a thing, then they can be influenced by all sorts of outside input.
Well, this is it.
Letting them settle into how they feel about it and letting them own that is a good thing to do too.
Absolutely. And it's that once they know where their boundary is as well, then they're much more careful about allowing other people to cross over their boundaries as well, isn't it? They can let other people know when they are being out of order or they are being offensive, but in a way that hopefully educates the other person, rather than alienates them more. And I think that's the thing sometimes, isn't it? We need to, when people ask me about what I do, for example, when I first sort of started talking more about working with sexual things, a massive wall of support from many of my colleagues, but also quite a few that thought what I was doing was completely awful. And, and it's about knowing yourself well enough to know where you need to go down your own path, isn't it? And it's passing those tools on to our clients as well, I think.
At home, Kaz, I'm curious, how do your kids feel about it?
Well, interestingly, I asked my eldest son about this recently, and he was just like, well, interesting. I thought it may be an embarrassing thing to him, when you're 12, 13, 14 years old. But his reply was, well, it's kind of really cool because I can just come and ask you stuff, and I know you're not embarrassed, and therefore I'm not embarrassed. And he said, and I've been able to put the kids right in the playground a bit as well, because sometimes, some of the things that they say, it's just wrong. So, I think it's like anything. If you're brought up and around something, hypnosis is a way of life in our household. Both my children are hypno babies. We use hypnosis with our children all the time. So I think it's, again, isn't it? If you're brought up to believe something is healthy and good, that's what you're brought up to believe. Whereas if you're brought up in the negative, then that's what you believe. So that they're brought up in a very respectful with sex and things like that, but in a positive way, so that they can talk about it. And
you said your oldest is 13.
He's 14.
14. It was before I was a hypnotist. I did a radio sex talk show. I did a sex talk show on the air for teens. And so as my daughter was growing up, her mother was on the radio talking sex to other teens. And when she was 13, about the age of your son, what often happened was her friends would come up to me and ask me questions, kind of covertly. And so it was like a fly on the wall appearance into her life. I knew what they were talking about over lunch because of all these questions that came into me. It was very interesting. Being open-minded like that with teens is.
Which shows that they need to ask the questions, doesn't it? They need somewhere to go.
It does. I'm surprised how much they really do know.
Yeah, and some of the misinformation that they have as well, you know, and if they can talk about that openly, and that's how re-education starts, isn't it? It's by open, honest communication. And, you know, I'm a big believer in, you know, with sex stuff, that probably should start at home. But, you know, if you're an adult that's got issues around sex and you're not comfortable with that, you automatically pass that on to your children, don't you? You know, so it's important, I think.
Yeah, and it probably should start at home. I mean, I think I agree with you about this. Probably should start at home as a natural conversation, not as a now now it's time we're gonna sit down and have the talk, you know. But something that the parents or in the household is discussed, even, you know, openly and honestly all the time, so that it isn't a question of when does it start. It's a question of
it's how it evolves, isn't it? You know, I know we've always had the policy, my husband and I with our children have always had the policy that, you know, we answer any question that they've asked us. When they were younger, we would just answer the question that they asked us. We didn't necessarily elaborate very much, but they got an honest, you know, they got the right information. And we would always do it in a tone of voice as if they just asked us, how do you make cheese? And so that there is no kind of, you know, and then what we found was they asked things as they've needed to know. I mean, my youngest is only 11, so there's a lot that he doesn't yet know, but he doesn't need to know that stuff yet. But as he asks us, you know, he'll get, you know, just a really kind of open answer, so that, you know, and we do have these conversations. I know, my son was asking about personal grooming the other day, and it's, you know, it's just a conversation in the same way that we might have, you know, how to bake a cake. And I think that's important, actually, because it takes away the guilt and the shame, doesn't it? And if you don't have that, you immediately have more respect for something, so it's easy to deal with.
And thank goodness that you specialize in this, because Michael, just a little point of difference in yes, it should happen in the home. And wouldn't it be nice if parents were open and honest about it? But geez, I know some parents, and I don't think they ought to be talking to their kids about sex because they just don't either get it or they're not comfortable with it. Please don't talk to your own kids about this thing. Don't give them your impressions. So it's nice to have someone like Kaz or some expert or someone that is available that you can send them to, a person that you can respect and rely on to send them to and talk to them about it.
Mm-hmm. And also the issues or the problems that they're having, you know, it's that it's just being able to have somewhere to go, isn't it, where you can have, it's that safe space again, isn't it? So you know, and everybody has a person probably in their lives for their children that can talk about this stuff knowledgeably. I think that's important as well. We don't want a load of misinformation going out there, but confidently and comfortably, that, you know, is based on, you know, good experience and not on guilt and shame. You know, it's you know, sometimes I know the church get that role, and there's nothing wrong with the church, but it's not always the most open, and I don't know quite how to put that. It's yeah, well, let's say that the church often comes into the sexual dysfunction side of things. So, you know.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Hey, check the chat room, Kaz, and not at the moment, but check it, because we're sending you apparently a lot of people who are going to send their kids to you to do the talk. So
yeah, Dave Ruby wants to send his daughter to you to do the talk. And by the way, I might mention, Joe has just given you this huge shout out. She says that she took your sexual freedom class in 2017. And it was a fantastic training, and you have wonderful materials, and you're just so knowledgeable that she recommends your training. And we haven't really talked about that. So I'm looking at the outline of the conference of the post conference that you taught at in Las Vegas, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is certainly ambitious and loaded with stuff. How often do you teach your course, and what's up with that?
Well, the next one actually is an online one. So interestingly, you were talking about teaching online. So the next one starts on the 22nd of November. We do it like this. Well, we say we do it like this. It's the first one I'm going to do that way, over Zoom, over 4 sessions, I think, but it may end up being a couple more. I don't really mind, as long as we get all the information in there. And so that starts on the 22nd of November.
Well, please tell us how to sign up for that or how to get more information.
If you go to sexualfreedomhypnosis.org, all the training is on there. And then I'm in Belgium, teaching in Belgium in March on the 2nd and 3rd, and I'm in New York on the 6th and 7th of May. And they may let me go back to HypnoThoughts again this year, I'm hoping.
I think it's a pretty done deal.
But yeah, so here, we have a nice big manual. It's very content heavy, because of the nature of sexual dysfunction. There are so many different ways you can teach or treat so many different things that it's not just a one size or a one script fits all. So we're looking at a lot of that. And I also teach the background. I am a big believer in, especially with this, because there is so much information out there. We talk a lot about hormones, what consent is, how dopamine works. We look at all the different sexual dysfunctions and what they are, because it's no good if a client comes in and tells you they've got X, Y, and Z and you don't know what that is, especially if you're advertising that you treat those things. I'm a big believer in knowing your therapy area, pretty thoroughly. So we teach all of that. And then also, as Joe's about to find out, she doesn't know this yet, but what I do is, as I update the materials, I update everybody that's already taken the course, and then we're all moving forwards, because we're learning new stuff all the time, and the sexual freedom hypnosis practitioners are really great at feeding back in some of the things that they've done. They've taken what I've taught them and made it better, and then we share that again, because that's how we move on in hypnosis anyway, isn't it? Is just taking what we know and then refining it and making it better and better. But it's and we look at, within that, we look at male issues, female issues, couples issues, the LGBTQ stuff, which is partly the transgender stuff, but it's also about with that is about treating people as people and not necessarily needing labels. But I think in today's world, you need to know what those labels are and understand what they mean, because those labels are important to some people. And then the kink-friendly stuff, which is understanding what consent is, what abuse is, understanding what some of these practices are. And then, the practitioners make their own kind of judgment as to where they want to work within that very broad sexual field. So there's people like me that work within all of those areas. I always encourage practitioners to work with what they're comfortable with, and they don't have to work right across the board. So I've just been updating databases today to kind of say where people would like to work and all that kind of stuff as well. So it's a good course. I'm very proud of it, actually. I'm very proud of the Sexual Freedom Hypnosis course, and there's books on the way. Shelley Stockwell got on my case about writing a book when I was nearly there, and lovely, inspiring people like yourself, Karen, as well. That kind of it keeps you moving forwards, doesn't it? Does. Yeah.
Good. We want to keep you moving forward. You're a real powerhouse. Don Pellis had a question I don't think we addressed, Kaz. Do you work with doctors or medical expertise of any kind to refer your clients for hormone workups or anything like that?
Okay. What I would normally do, if I've got somebody that comes to me and they haven't seen their doctor and they've got a new sexual dysfunction, is I immediately refer them to their general practitioner, because sexual dysfunction can just appear for physical reasons. So diabetes, cancer, all the normal things that will need to be kind of ruled out. And often just to see if there is anything kind of hormonally going on. But I also get the other way where doctors will recommend that they can't refer on the NHS here in the UK, but they can kind of point people in the right direction. So I get a steady stream from the general practitioners and from the psychosexual clinics around here in my direction, which is always good, because often they don't really know what to do. They don't really have very much, because a lot of the stuff that's based on that 4-stage model that we were speaking about right at the beginning of kind of almost trying to arouse people physically when, they need to be aroused in here, don't they, So, yeah. and clearing away, they'll send me if there's been a history of abuse, or they need to clear away some negative stuff. And sometimes I had a doctor actually refer another doctor to me recently just to go in and talk to him about just re-education, because they were giving out numbing cream for vaginismus. Can you
imagine? So it sounds like a class for doctors would be in order.
Some doctors, not all.
Doctors,
not all.
Of course.
Yeah.
Nice.
Right.
So we're only about we're about 9:45 already. The time just flying by, and I know people are typing these things in, but you're so good at fielding these questions, and I think it would be useful to let people have their Q&A. So here's what we can do. If you know how to raise your hands on this software, you guys feel free to do that. The simplest way, however, would be in the chat room. If you just write question, or even put a question mark so we know you've got one, we'll open up your microphone, and then you can speak with the lady herself. Now they're all rushing to do that.
I feel so loved and popular suddenly.
Well, there we go.
Okay, so Joseph has a question. Joseph, my new best friend.
Hi, new bestie. I have a question. And I had a client who was transgendered, female to male, and while she wasn't completely, she hadn't gone through the surgery, he now had a fetish that was, it was humiliation, like to be humiliated, and didn't want to carry that into a relationship. And he asked me if I could remove the fetish. And what he wanted in exchange for that fetish was no sexual arousal at all. And I was completely incapable. It was beyond my my ability to, what he said to me was that he felt very, very uncomfortable when being sexually aroused because he didn't like being wet. And I was at a loss, honestly. So while I can see, I can understand and almost empathize with wanting to remove humiliation and the need for humiliation, just because you can't carry that into many relationships.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not certain. I mean, I was not able to help the client, and I part of me wanted to say, you need to see a mental health professional, but he had. So I'm just wondering, like, now that I know you, I would just give him your number. But I'm wondering what you could say about that. And
okay, well, there's two separate issues there, isn't there? So let me get this right. So this was female to male, wasn't it? Who was uncomfortable with their own arousal. But a fetish, the definition of a fetish is a true fetish is the inability to become aroused without the presence of that fetish. So the fetish, the humiliation fetish, is a kind of a separate issue to the arousal issue, if that makes sense. Yeah. So I would have looked at that as two separate things. With the fetish, there's two things. There's two routes you can go down with that. One is the self-acceptance route, because lots of people have fetishes that don't cause them too many problems. It's just the fact that it's something unusual that can cause that kind of that problem in their head, if you like. Or the other thing, of course, is getting rid of the fetish, which with the humiliation thing, usually with a fetish, you're looking at a kind of a regression to cause and some clearing, and then again it's that self-acceptance. With the arousal thing, I think asking somebody to essentially make somebody asexual is almost impossible with hypnosis. I don't think it's something, I think it's right up there if somebody asked you to make them not be homosexual, say, for example, anymore, which is not something that we would do. I think probably the only way that they would do that is maybe to do that via a hormonal route, perhaps, or something along those lines, or to make them comfortable with arousal, to see arousal as a masculine and feminine thing. I guess because if this is pre-op as well, have they now had their operation and
it was
or
it was an odd thing. When I asked if he intended to go through with the full operation, he said he wanted to maintain the ability to harvest eggs in case he wanted to have his own children. So it seemed to me that there were a whole lot more issues involved in that whole process than he was actually getting addressed. And we met twice, and it ended with my basically saying, "This is beyond my ability. I'm sorry. I'll look for people if you'd like me to refer." And he opted out. He said, "No, it's all right. Thank you," and went on his way. So no, he hasn't had his operation, and I don't think he intends to. And it always hurts me a little bit to say to a client, I don't think I can help you. Not that you can't be helped, but I don't think I'm the one to do it. It just hurts me.
It's hard to say that, isn't it, sometimes? But obviously it hurts them more if we don't say it. I think the key to being a good therapist sometimes is knowing when to pass that person on to somebody else. So don't feel bad about that. That's I think that's always the hallmark of a great therapist myself. But I'm sure most people here would agree with me with that. But I think with that, I mean, there's so many issues there, isn't there, in terms of, I think probably a lot of that, again, it's back to self-acceptance, isn't it? Of if you're then choosing to remain kind of physically female, it's about how you can incorporate that into who you are, and still be able to enjoy that kind of sexuality or those sexual feelings. And I think those feelings are, we can look at the masculine side of that and the feminine side of that. So it's always very, very complex, and it's a very, I've certainly found within the transgender community, there isn't a one size fits all approach, and it's very much looking at how people have been treated in the run up to their transition, and also then what's stopping somebody from making that transition as well. If that's where they feel they want to be, it may be that, maybe they're somewhere in the middle, and there are people that are in the middle as well. And that's something else to kind of be aware of, isn't it?
Thank you.
So question for you. I'm guessing that these are not one-off clients that you're doing, no pun intended. I'm guessing that it takes more sessions than one often.
Oh, yeah.
And do you sell programs? Do you request that they come back when they want to, or do you have a plan?
It varies from client to client with this. So, it also depends what the clients come to see me for. So if I've got a transgender client that's got a phobia, they get treated, it's the same kind of 1 or 2 session deal with, for a phobia.
Sure.
I don't make the assumption that that's why they've come to see me, but I tend to get more post-op clients than I do pre-op. And I think that's probably to do with where I live, is that we have a fairly good service for counselling pre-op, but it's kind of getting people ready for the operation, ready for transition. Then what happens is they have their operation and then everything disappears. And it's this kind of idea that, once whatever it is that you thought was wrong has been put right, this is kind of how it's sold to them, then, your body's in the right state, therefore you'll be okay. But it's that massive mental transition, even if they've been living as a male or a female for however many years before their operation. It's a very final thing, isn't it? And it's just in the same way that we have any different kind of major transitions in our lives. it takes a while to get used to, and we need support with that. So I don't sell a specific package for people that are transitioning, but I do provide a safe space. And the one thing that the transgender community do is speak to each other. So once your name is out there, then you get, like anything, isn't it? You get that stream of people that come because you know that they're not going to be judged, and also that you'll treat them as an individual and not a person that just happens to be transgender. And I think that's really important.
Nice.
And I wasn't even talking about just transgender clients, but most of your erectile dysfunctions or help me improve my libido, all of those things tend to be more than one session. You're going into some pretty deep stuff sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, again, it depends. If I've got, somebody that's, come in, I don't know, got erectile dysfunction, and they've had, they've had a piece of bad feedback, then often that can be just a one session thing. But most of my work isn't single session stuff. It isn't, we're looking at, normally around the 5 or 6 session mark, sometimes more. It just really depends. But I kind of believe in, we need to get to the real heart of what's going on and make sure that that's been dealt with. Otherwise, we're often just sticking plasters over it, aren't we? And it doesn't, we want it to stick, don't we? We want them to be able to move forward in their lives and be able to have a good sex life, or be able to have that self-acceptance. And from the way I work, that often doesn't occur in just one session.
And Don would like to inquire about how long your sessions are.
All my sessions, I allow 90 minutes for every session. They normally run for an hour to an hour and 10.
Lovely.
Okay.
Well, it's been great. The time has flown by, Kaz, and we're going to give you an opportunity to get some rest.
Thank you for spending the night with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's I have so much respect for you both. It was a real honor to be asked. So thank you for inviting me.
Well, you're really welcome. We could talk to you on, and we'll just have to get you on here again sometime. But in the meantime, just thank you very, very much, sincerely. And I want to make sure everybody out here knows that they can get in touch with you through sexualfreedomhypnosis.org. And is there a specific email address as well, Cass?
Yeah, the easiest one to get me on is expert.hypnosis@gmail.com.
expert.hypnosis@gmail.com. There you go. So, gosh, I don't want to say goodbye. However, I got to do my announcements, so hold on just for a second, Kaz, because we're going to give you a send-off. So just to remind everybody, we have recorded this program this evening, and tomorrow it will be posted on the IMDHA forum. It will also be posted in the virtual chapter group on, what is that thing? Oh, Facebook. I remember now. Virtual chapter on Facebook. And further, the virtual chapter, by the way, that is fed video from a YouTube channel. There is a YouTube channel called Virtual Chapter as well. So you could look that up and see all of our old past meetings, whatever it is that you'd like. So check us out. Thanks again, everybody, for being here. And we are going to do what we always do shamelessly, and that is open up all of the microphones at once and give everybody a chance to, in the great cacophony of love, tell you how much we appreciate you being with us, Kaz, and wish you good night. So,
yay, thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks, Kaz.
Thanks, Kaz.
Thanks, Michael and Karen.
Great program.
Bye. See you next month.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
it's great fun.
Love you.
Bye.
Oh, Maria, look. I love her.